Welcome. It's my pleasure as Dean to welcome you to Shenandoah Conservatory and this year's American Icons event. American Icons was established to bring our conservatory students into closer contact with artists who are not only iconic, but who, like our great teachers here, reveal through their life and work a great generosity and wild openness of heart. As one of the most heralded dramatic sopranos of our time, Debbie Voigt has thrilled audiences worldwide. To those observing, it's always been clear that Debbie Voigt not only loves to sing, she loves everything about the theatrical moment. I'm not certain that any soprano has inhabited roles such as Strauss's Ariadne and Wagner's Isolde with more complete brilliance. We now know that even while she was accumulating accolades for her performances, she was facing some extraordinarily difficult personal moments, moments that she had kept hidden from her own best friends and family. And in the book Call Me Debbie, published last year, and it's a book I'd strongly advise you to get, she has outlined her life journey with extraordinary honesty and gentle reflection. All of which is to say, she's perfectly positioned to be one of our American icons. She's an extraordinary artist, and she has brought great generosity to her work and life with others. She has given us still further insight into how we might travel in a life journey inspired by the arts. And so, conservatory students, faculty, staff, and guests, please join me in welcoming to the stage the one and only Debbie Voigt. It's wonderful to have you here. Thank you for taking the time. You scooted down on the train this morning.
I did, yes.
And thank you, Nancy, for bringing Debbie Voigt over from Union Station. I only saw the beginning part of that masterclass. You have a wonderful directness in your communication with students. Did you have teachers along the way that really illuminated that way of being? Or?
I did. I had teachers, one in particular that was my university teacher, Jane Paul, and she was very direct. There was just no two ways about it. She told me what I needed to hear, and I heard it, and I used to cry a lot. I still do. Whenever anything happens in my life, I cry. But that was a safe place, and she was a really wonderful musician. She is now 86 years old. I'm still friends with her. In fact, I'll be seeing her in a few weeks. And she used to always say to me, we were talking about in the master class earlier about how to sing technically well and then also to emote. And at this time, there was a commercial for Rice Krispies on television. And it was the aria from Pagliacci. And they would say, "No more Rice Krispies." And so she would say to me, I'd be singing away and she'd say, "I need more Rice Krispies," and I knew exactly what she meant. But yeah, she was very direct, and I think that teachers need to be that way, and singers, if they want to have a career, need to learn how to hear that and take it in. Now, that being said, she always came from a place of kindness.
So that's where the safe space comes in.
Yeah, absolutely.
That it was from a place of kindness.
Right. Yeah.
If we can start at the beginning. You've written and you've shared about how you had an absolute innate desire to perform from as early as you can remember. But you also grew up in a really conservative family household where that desire didn't necessarily was understood or necessarily nurtured during those early years. And I know many of our students, for many of us, when there's an exceptional drive towards artistry, we aren't necessarily like everyone else in the family. So how was that? How was that disconnect growing up?
Well, it was difficult because my parents were very, very young when they had me. My mother was 17 and my father was 18 when I was born. And we came from the suburbs of Chicago in a very strict conservative Baptist upbringing. So being demonstrative in any way, shape, or form was really not accepted. And certainly, they didn't know what to do with this 5-year-old daughter who was acting out all the time and being sort of larger than life. I'm sure they just thought, well, she's going to grow out of it eventually. Yeah. And
Become serious.
Yeah,
or
yeah.
something.
Or this acting out that she has is going to be channeled into serving God.
Okay.
That was okay. You know, I could get up in front of church and emote away like the Virgin Mary, and that was fine. But Eliza Doolittle in the living room was a little strange.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. You mentioned Jane Paul. People hit college age in really different places in their life. It's always surprising to me that one 18, 19-year-old can be so different in life in terms of where they are in maturity and development than another. There was a kind of wiggle rough patch there for you before you found Jane Paul at Cal State Fullerton.
Yeah,
right?
that's true. When I left high school, I entered a private university as a choral conducting major. And I lasted about a semester and a half, and I mean a half. And I just had a really hard time in those early years in finding my way. And so I got a job first at a sporting goods store, and then doing accounts receivable at in some sort of lighting distributorship. But I kept singing, and I was singing primarily in church. Many of the young singers today will probably have church jobs, and that's where we have an opportunity to perform. And I got a scholarship from the Crystal Cathedral back in the day, and I had this teacher who, we had maybe 6 months of lessons, and she was so good, and she was helping me so much, and finally one day, she stopped, and she put her hands on my shoulder, and she said, "You have to do something with this voice. You have a responsibility." And I always knew that my talent, I believe, is God-given, but I never thought of it as being something that I was supposed to give back. You know, I thought, oh, I have this gift and I'm going to sing in church, but I never would have allowed myself to think that there might be something else that I'm supposed to do. And we had that moment, and I thought, okay, I've got to go back to school. And so I went to Cal State Fullerton primarily because at the time the tuition was like $300 a semester, right? Oh. And I auditioned for the head of the voice department, who was Jane Paul, and we just clicked, and that was it.
But the passion that you brought was really more towards musicals, right?
Yes. Yeah, I really loved musicals. I still do. And I think, looking back, if my first teacher that I started studying with at 16 had been a country western singer or a Broadway singer, I might have gone in a whole other direction. Yeah. But she was an opera singer.
I can't quite imagine you as country western, but I guess all sorts of things are possible.
Well, my legal name is Debbie Joy Voigt, which sounds kind of country, right? Debbie Joy, the Grand Ole Opry. Yeah. And I just thought that Debbie Joy was never going to be taken seriously as an opera singer, and so I changed it to Deborah. Yeah. And nobody calls me Deborah. If they know me, they call me Debbie.
Okay, so there's a couple of very short clips, and I think the first one is Annie, Get Your Gun, Glimmerglass.
One of my best roles.
And you're being, I think, introduced by the director, Francesca.
Okay.
But it's a very short clip, and then I think the second is from one of my favorite musical moments of you as Ariadne, and the Met production with James Levine.
Yeah.
And just a couple of minutes, but just so our students have a sense of your connection to drama across multiple forms. Can we play that?
What I thought would be interesting would be to take someone who had a large voice on the operatic stage and hear what does it sound like when blended with this music. And Debbie Voigt is probably the reigning dramatic soprano of our age. And to hear her sing this music is a joy. It's different, it's beautiful, it's lush, it's powerful.
My favorite moment of Debbie in the show is watching her in Sun in the Morning, Moon at Night, because she's in this gigantic white ball gown dancing effortlessly with everyone moving around her while she's singing at the, it's what she does best.
Such a beautiful opera.
Yes. She makes me cry, that one, at that moment. There's something so vulnerable about her, and the characters that I think I have identified with the most are characters that have that, you know, that there's something in them that's longing but hopeful at the same time. And she's one of them. I think of Sieglinde that way. You know, she's in this horrible, horrible, horrible place in her life. And yet, she thinks there's something better. And that's just, I love that. I just love that feeling. That was one big girl, though. Oh, my goodness. Lifetime ago.
Let's talk about that lifetime and that transition, if we can. Many of the students here, well, maybe some of them will know, but many of them won't know about the black dress incident and Covent Garden. Maybe you can mention a little about that, but I'm especially interested the relationship of a singer to their emotional and their physical well-being. I wonder how that's changed over time and how you think about that now. Well,
you know, opera clearly has become more visually oriented, and so I think singers are going to be held up to a greater level of scrutiny than perhaps I was. That being said, if it's a fantastic voice, it's going to rise to the top no matter what. I mean, that's just going to happen.
Yeah.
The only time when I look at pictures from that time in my life, it's the only time I miss my weight is when I'm singing like that, because having all that extra weight was an automatic support system, right? I took a breath, it went whoomp, and I went, you know? So, you know, it's been a process to sort of relearn it, and I think that I'm still doing that. But at the time that these performances took place, I was kind of the best known Ariadne in the world at that time, if I may be so bold.
Yeah.
And I was asked to do Ariadne at the Royal Opera House in London, and it was a new production, but it was a revival of a new production, so it wasn't as if we were showing up for, you know, okay. And I had sung at the Royal Opera House twice prior to this invitation. So
they knew you.
Yeah, they knew. So I signed the contract, they signed the contract, everything's peachy keen, and about 6 months or so before we were supposed to begin rehearsals, my manager got a call from the Opera House saying that Debbie Voigt was not going to work in this production. Why? Well, it's a modern production, and Ariadne will be wearing a black cocktail dress. So my manager says, and they said, we think that she's too heavy for this production. Now, I knew that my weight was an issue. It was not the first time I'd heard this, but in a situation like that where an opera house decides that for whatever reason you're not going to work within the confines of their production or whatever, they have to offer you something else. That's the business side of it. They would say, okay, we can't use her for Ariadne, we're gonna do whatever, XYZ opera. And they said to my manager, well, we don't have anything. Okay, so then he says, all right, well, she'll do a concert. Well, we don't think that's going to work either. And so they, in essence, fired me. but we had a fully executed contract. So about 4 months after this happened, I was going to London to do a recital. And I was doing press for the recital. And I'm sitting with this press person, this journalist, and he says, so you have sung at Covent Garden twice. I said, yes, I have. Yes, Frauenschatten and blah, blah, blah. Okay, when are you coming back again? And I didn't know what to say. It just caught me off guard. I mean, I didn't want to say, oh, well, they haven't asked me, because that wasn't true. They had. So I said, well, I was to come, but we've had a difference of opinion about something. And he just, I don't know whether he just knew it immediately. Yeah. He said, what role? I said, well, it was to be Ariadne. And he had seen that it was a new production. He said, oh, you were fired because you're too fat.
And your reviews of your performance in that role, I mean, all over the place, are stunning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was that. And, you know, they had to subsequently pay out the contract. It's amazing how theaters will suddenly, you know, when they're negotiating a contract, it's all about art. You know, well, you're going to sing this because you love it, and you're going to sing it for less money because it's art. And then suddenly when it's flipped, and you say, but this is a business, and we have a fully executed contract, and you have to honor it, then it's like, whoa, you know. So they paid it off. I then subsequently had 6 weeks off, and I had gastric bypass surgery. So in a way, they paid for it. And I have since gone back and sung Ariadne in that performance, in that production. So yeah. There you go.
Yeah. And now the idea of how important is a body's health. To many, I mean, dancers have their own relationship to that issue.
Right.
But for instrumentalists and vocalists, as you shared, they have certain things that are idiosyncratic too. But how do you make sense of how important it is to stay healthy, physically, emotionally?
Well, I think that's the big problem with what we saw in that picture. I mean, it's all well and good for a singer to have a little bit of extra weight on them. That's kind of normal. You know, we're big boned. We're meant to be seen on big stages, and you know that's fine. But that woman had a problem. And when I walked out on stage at about 330 pounds, that spoke to something greater. Yeah. You know, that meant there was an issue. There was an emotional issue, because nobody wants to be that weight. I didn't want to be that weight, no question. But I didn't see a way out of it. So singers have to have as healthy a relationship with their bodies as they can. It's your instrument, you know. But that was something else.
And it will come to a head one way or another,
it will,
won't it?
Yeah, no question. No question.
Yeah. And you outline, and we don't necessarily have time now, but you outline, it took a lot to get you to that edge, to really make it clear there needs to be something really big to change, because your resilience, it seems, in getting to that performance moment and then turning it on, you seem to have great resilience. It seems to be a thing that you've always had.
Yeah, I think it is. And if I learned one thing in writing this book, it was to recognize that in myself. Through all of the various, you know, issues that came to the forefront and that I had to struggle with, the thing that I found is that I always managed to pick it up and go on. And I think that partially that has to do with knowing, feeling what I said earlier about having a responsibility. Because I was given this great, great gift, and it's allowed me to interact with people all over the world and to have this incredible life experience on a stage. So I think that no matter what was happening, I somehow was able to go, okay, but this is what you're going to do, and you're going to do it. And all singers have to be that way. They have to, because they're going to encounter so much criticism, and it you know, you take what you can, you let the rest go, and you get up the next day and you do it all over again, no matter what. Yeah.
I think you put it at one point, you speak about how technique is so critically important. The instrument's really important, but I think the phrase you've used is the beating heart of the music. Is that a connection that you would describe you've always had? Is that a connection that's grown over time? How do you make sense of that?
I think that's a connection I've always had.
Yeah.
I knew from the time that I was this little girl that when I sang, I got an emotional response from people. I knew that they were right here, and that I've always felt that way. That's the joy of it for me, is to go out and to sing my best and have you think, oh, wow, yeah, that was good. And that's a hard thing for young singers to find, because as we spoke in the masterclass, it has to be about having a great technique. But if they can get that going and somehow connect to the music that is so beautiful, that we're all so very, very lucky. Yeah. If they can get to that, that's being a performer. Too many times, I think, singers are, and we talked about this too, I'm repeating myself, but we get a little bit selfish. You know, I'm only going to show you this much of myself because this much makes me scared. And until you can let that go and take a chance. I just did a residency at a school, and the singers were afraid of their emotional life. You know, they're afraid that it's going to be too big, that it's going to be too dramatic, it's too showy. And I kept trying to assure them that we would tell them if it was too much. It's much easier to say, whoa, 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 than it is to go, come on, come on, come on. And the sooner you can get out there and just lay it out on the stage, the better it's going to be. Yeah. And your technique will kick in as a result.
Yeah. One of the most interesting little episodes described in this book is when you were in the opera study program at San Francisco, but beyond being prepared to sing under a study, you went on bus tours. a group of maybe a couple of dozen out west somewhere, right. And you would stop and do what sounded like opera variety shows in schools. And I mean, it sounds really quite extraordinary. What was that?
Well, it was what used to be called Western Opera Theater, and it was one of the phases of San Francisco's training program. And yeah, we did Don Giovanni on tour across the United States on a Greyhound bus for 3 months. And if you weren't singing one of the lead roles, you were doing chorus. And then some of us were involved in what was called an Hour for the Opera, which was an introduction for children to opera. And it was 4 different characters from operas. And Carmen was the character, the mezzo character. Well, we're doing Don Giovanni, there's no mezzos on the tour, and I had the best low notes, so I got stuck. I mean, was blessed to play Carmen. And we would go to these, you know, we were not in the metropolises. We were in tiny little towns across the country, and we would do this Hour for the Opera at 8 o'clock in the morning. And these children would be lined along the stage just like, you know, picking their noses and, you know, but loving it and really having an experience that they probably will remember. They may never go to an opera, but they had an experience. It was great. It was a wonderful training program. You learn a lot about yourself. You learn a lot about getting along with other people, playing well in the sandbox, how to stay healthy, a lot. You learned a lot.
Yeah. I am wondering if you have any advice for young artists in my position. When you go into an audition or you have to show somebody in such a brief period of time, you know, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, your greatest potential. And I find it so hard, and you saw this, to go in and take immediate ownership and be unapologetic in front of somebody you don't know when you're just like me, like me, like me, I really want you to like me. Just sort of anything that would kickstart that mentality and make you really, you know, a presence or a force to be reckoned with rather than somebody kind of...
Okay, if you're going into an audition going, like me, like me, like me, how about like me, I like me? How about, I'm going to do this audition, and I'm going to try to conquer this. Maybe it's going to be your jaw. You know, maybe it's going to be whatever, you know, but you know, no matter what, you're going to go into an audition, and they're going to have an idea about you the minute you walk in, no matter what. You're too blonde, you're too pretty, you're whatever, who knows. So if you go in looking for that sort of feedback, it's never going to happen. It's just not. And the sooner you can go in and have your own goals for that audition. Maybe you're going to try out a piece you haven't sung before, or you're going to, whatever it is, we don't, that's for you to determine. But the sooner that you can do that, the better off you're going to be. I will tell you, too, that I never got one job off of an audition, not one. I was a fantastic competitor, so I did really well in competition because it's a different kind of energy, right? Competition is a performance. I would go into an audition, and I probably was doing the same thing you were, and I was dealing with body issues that I knew were a problem the minute I put my foot in the room. And I just went like that instead of like that. So the sooner you can just do it for yourself, the better off you're going to be.
Other questions from students?
And you mentioned Europe, and we actually, just last week, were talking with Nancy about some of her first experiences internationally, and I'm wondering if you could maybe talk a little bit about that and how that was for you, maybe your first time, or some times that didn't go, maybe how you thought they would go.
My first time was singing in Brussels at the Monet Theatre, and I was doing The Fifth Maid in Electra. And if you have to be a maid in Electra, she's the best one to be. I had a hard time. I am so Miss America. I come home and kiss the runway. I really struggled with it. I tell you to go to Europe, but I had a hard time with it. I think the first time I was there, I had it in my head that I could call my soon-to-be husband after midnight, and it would be cheaper because it's after midnight. Well, it turns out not so much internationally, and I could have flown him over and back twice for what I spent in telephone calls, and that was a long time ago. I am linguistically challenged. I speak what I call rehearsal German. So if we're in a rehearsal environment, I understand everything and can speak to you, but idiomatically, forget it. So the sooner you can go and embrace your languages, the better off you're going to be. And Nancy is a great resource for that sort of, because she's much smarter than me in that area.
Do you?
A little louder, darling.
Do you sense it's changing, that European scene versus American scene in the operatic field?
I don't know. I mean, productions tend to be a little bit iffier, perhaps, is that the best way to put it, over there? Yeah. And you just have to go with it. You just have to jump in as though you think it's Zeffirelli, because that's how you get some experience. Yeah.
There was an entire film made about one of those sets that you fought with, wasn't there, in New York?
I don't know what you're talking about.
All right, sorry to bring that up. Other questions?
But yes, there was. Actually, it's a very good documentary. It's called Wagner's Dream. And it's about the producing of the ring cycle and the machine.
Which moved and creaked and banged.
Moved and creaked, yeah. It did get better. I say that the machine is feminine because she's a bigger diva than anybody in the room. She weighs more. They had to reinforce the stage for her. She certainly is paid more. And she's temperamental. Oh. But I thought it was really beautiful. I am very proud of that whole experience. It was challenging to me because these were my first Brunhildes. Yeah. And Robert Lepage, the director, because of the intricacies of the production, was really focused on the production. So I got very little character development from him. So I was really kind of left to my own devices, which, thank God, by then were pretty good. To portray a character that, suspends over 3 operas, and how to see that journey of the character from the moment that we meet her as this tomboy to what we see at the end, and how to sustain that over a week. Yeah. It was really challenging, but yes, on the opening night of Die Valkyrie, I'm standing, and it's being televised or being taped for this documentary, and I am in the wings, and I am so charged up, and I've got my spear and my helmet, and I'm just, oh my God, I'm getting ready. Oh, yes. And I go running out, and I step on the machine, and I stepped on my dress, and I went down on my butt and slid all the way down. And I wish that I had had a recorder in my head to tape what was going on in my head at the moment. And, you know, it's just like, you go into this, like, surreal thing, like, are we going to start again? Or certainly, we're bringing in the curtain, and we're going to start over. I had that same feeling the night that Kanye West took the microphone away from Taylor Swift. I thought, oh, my God, we're going to stop. We're starting over, right? Save those moments in life.
Time for one last question, please.
I was wondering how you, when you're a young singer, how do you balance maximizing vocal growth without challenging yourself too much?
I don't think that you can challenge yourself too much. I mean, if you're in a studio with a teacher that you trust, that teacher's not going to challenge you beyond what is healthy for you in the moment. And all of the singers that we heard today are great singers. They're all gifted in their various ways, and they have to be challenged, right? That's just the way it is. There's no such thing. I mean, I'm years old, and I'm still challenging myself, because if you're lucky enough to have the sort of career that I've had, which has been very public, you know, there's this what I would call the honeymoon phase, you know, where you make your debut and they're like, wow, she's just the best. And then the next year it's like, yeah, she's really good. And the third year it's like, what else can you do? You know, I mean, it just changes, and you have to challenge yourself constantly to show a public a different thing. And even at your age, you're going to do your juries, right, coming up, okay? So you're going to do that. Then you're going to be challenged with the next thing, and then the next thing. And it's never going to stop. It just doesn't. Ever. Ever.
It's such a pleasure to have you with us. Thank you for taking time today to be with us.
My pleasure.
Please join me in thanking Deborah. All right, wishing you all a good rest of the semester, and good luck with the rest of your week.